Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to unpack a powerful and honestly kind of wild three-word strategy used by the super wealthy, and it's totally changing the conversation around taxes in America. It's called buy, borrow, die.
I mean, it's a question that really makes you scratch your head, right? How can someone be worth billions, actual billions, but pay next to nothing in income tax? You see these headlines all the time. Huge fortunes getting even bigger, but their tax bills are tiny. So what gives? How is that even possible? Now, you're probably thinking it's got to be some super complicated secret financial wizardry, right? Something only a team of expensive lawyers could figure out. But what if I told you the core idea is surprisingly simple? It boils down to just three words. All right, let's pull back the curtain on this thing. The billionaire's tax secret. There it is. Buy, borrow, die. Look, this isn't just some catchy phrase someone made up. It's a very real, very powerful financial strategy. The name actually comes from a USC law professor, Ed McCaffrey, who coined it way back in the 90s to explain in a really simple way how the wealthy can legally, and I mean legally, pay so little in taxes. And if you want to see the impact, look no further than this number, 3.4%. A huge investigation by ProPublica, using actual IRS data, found that the 25 wealthiest Americans paid what they called a true tax rate of just 3.4% on all the money their fortunes grew by. And a huge piece of that puzzle is this buy, borrow, die strategy. Okay, so how on earth does this actually work? Let's break down the mechanics of this three-step dance that lets you access your wealth without really touching it, tax-wise. It all starts with step one, buy. Pretty simple, right? You buy assets that are going to grow in value over time. Think stocks, real estate, maybe a whole business. But here's the absolute golden rule. You hold on to them. You don't sell. Now step two, borrow. So you need cash to live, right? But instead of selling your stocks, you go to a bank and take out a loan using your massive growing portfolio as collateral. This gives you cash to spend tax-free. And then step three, die. Okay, it sounds a little dark, I know, but for your finances, it's the masterstroke. When you pass away, your heirs get all those assets, and because of a little rule called stepped-up basis, the value of those assets gets reset to whatever they're worth on the day you die. All those years, even decades of growth, poof, the tax bill on that gain just vanishes. Gone. Let's really zoom in on that borrow step, because this is the real game changer. Think about it. Let's say you need $1 million. Option A, you sell $1 million worth of stock. The second you do that, bam, you've realized a gain and you owe capital gains tax. A big chunk of that cash goes right to the IRS. But with option B, you go to a bank and just borrow $1 million against that same stock. That cash you get, it's a loan, not income, so it's not taxed. Meanwhile, your entire portfolio is still invested, still growing. You get the cash and you keep your assets. It's a huge difference. Okay, I know what you're thinking. This has to be illegal, right? This sounds like some massive loophole. But here's the thing. It's perfectly legal. And it's not even a hidden trick. It's built on two of the most basic, long-standing pillars of the entire U.S. tax code. And this is a really important distinction to make. The Supreme Court has said for a long, long time that there's a huge difference between illegal tax evasion, which is lying and cheating, and legal tax avoidance, which is just arranging your finances to pay the least amount of tax the law allows. Buy, borrow, die is squarely in that second category. It's just using the rules as they're written. So what are these big foundational rules? Well, the first one is something called taxation on realization. In the US, you don't pay taxes just because your stocks go up in value. Those are just paper gains. You only owe tax when you actually sell the asset and lock in or realize that profit. The second one is that stepped-up basis at death we talked about. Again, when you inherit an asset, its tax basis gets stepped up to its current market value. It completely wipes out the taxable gain that built up while the original owner was alive. You put those two principles together and boom, you have the engine that makes buy, borrow, die run. But okay, just because it's legal doesn't mean it's simple or consequence-free. Not at all. This strategy has huge ripple effects on the broader economy. And, believe it or not, it carries some pretty serious hidden risks for the people who use it. So why should anyone care? Well, economists point out a few big problems. First, there's a basic fairness issue, or what they call inequity. Think about it. A doctor or an engineer making a good salary might pay a 30% tax rate, while someone living off millions in tax-free loans from their portfolio pays, well, a lot less. It also fuels the wealth gap because, let's be real, you need to already be wealthy to get these kinds of huge low-interest loans. And finally, there's something called the lock-in effect. It actually encourages people to just sit on their assets forever to avoid taxes, even if selling them and reinvesting that money somewhere else would be better for the economy as a whole.
But here's the real nail biter for the person using this strategy. The whole thing works because the value of your assets is high and hopefully keeps going up. But what happens if the market tanks? You get something you never want to get, a maintenance call. It's your lender on the phone saying, hey, your portfolio just crashed and it's no longer valuable enough to cover your loan. You need to give us more cash or more stock right now. And if you can't, the lender has the right to start selling your assets for you to pay back the loan. And guess what? A forced sale triggers the exact capital gains taxes you were trying to avoid, all happening at the absolute worst possible moment when the market is down. It can be a total disaster. So, all of this brings us to the massive debate that's happening in Washington right now. As this strategy becomes more well-known, policymakers are starting to ask a really fundamental question. Should we change the rules that make this all possible? And there are a few ideas on the table. A report from Yale's Budget Lab lays out some options that really focus on that borrow step. One idea is called deemed realization. Basically, it would treat borrowing a huge amount against your assets the same as selling them, so it would trigger a tax bill. Another thought is a withholding tax. When you take out the loan, a small slice of it automatically goes to the IRS as a sort of down payment on future taxes. Or you could have a small annual excise tax, like maybe 0.5% a year on the loan balance. It wouldn't stop the strategy, but it would make it a little more expensive to do. And that really leaves us with the billion-dollar question at the heart of this whole thing. Is buy, borrow, die a sneaky loophole that needs to be closed? Or is it just the natural, logical outcome of how our tax system has been designed for decades? You know, the principle that you only tax gains when you actually sell. How we answer that question, well, that's going to define the future of tax policy in a huge way.